Good morning. Hello. This is Talking Devils, your favourite Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Barton, joined as always by Manchester United legend Paul Parker to talk over. Um, the familiar phrase I had last season was to talk over a difficult week at Manchester United, and looks like we might be using that phrase quite a lot this week, this season as well. If anything is to go by on yesterday's performance. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Feel free to get your questions in if you're watching on YouTube and Facebook as well. If you're watching the replay, feel free to say hello. We do still reply to comments. And if you're listening back on the audio podcast, please be sure to give us a review and subscription on the platform you're listening on. Paul, how are you doing? How
I'm
was your
good,
week?
thank you. Weekend was okay. I had to endure watching football at 4:30 in the afternoon, and it was absolutely cooking at London Stadium.
Yeah, it really was. And it's quite when you see United play as they do, and then you saw City play the way that they did. Especially the second goal was incredible for Haaland. You know what you're up against, really. So some comments coming in already before we get on to talking about the game. John says, "Good morning. What a mess yesterday. Arguably lucky to lose by only one. Yet we're going to get into that." Keane, good morning, mate. He says United have agreed for a fee for Rabiot. We'll get onto that. We are going to talk about him in a moment. And Mike Pierre says, "Morning, gents. A team that struggled to sixth last season has this summer sought to improve by trimming the squad, getting three in. But why I'm still watching Fred and McTominay struggling in midfield, Glazeronomics. Oh, I have got a rant coming up for sure. Is empty stadiums the answer already coming in from Simon? Well, we'll talk about that as well, actually. And Louise Dunn, 7, being a United fan for 31 years, this club is dead. No way back. No, don't agree with that. But we'll talk about it. You know, United are always going to be there. In whatever guise they are, but they're still there. Okay, so yeah, United won, Brighton 2, Paul. Desperately poor performance. Harry Maguire started well. He made some good decisions earlier on, and the crowd really seemed to get behind him. Then he sort of switched off for a minute, and Dello did for their first goal. And really, I think the thing for me in the first half was that it was very clear that they had set up a good tactical plan. First of all, they're good on the ball anyway. They're a very good progressive team. They've outplayed us before, but they seem to have a plan to target Maguire, and they seem to have a plan to let McTominay and Fred have as much of the ball as they wanted to. There was one point even where McTominay was allowed the ball 25 yards from goal, and he was allowed. They were basically encouraging him to run towards goal and shoot. And he got to the point where he even though he was running with the ball, he ended up in this dangerous tackle where he could have easily been sent off for, which says a lot at the moment. They were able to trust that United's defence would make its own mistakes. Shaw and Dalot at one point, Dalot's positioning was so bad that he was playing as a central striker when we were defending. And you could see a three-man defence. I was like, Maguire's got 40 yards of space to cover on this side. He's nowhere near. And Dalot was sort of like gesticulating for people to get back. So that's your position, mate. I can't have imagined ever seeing Paul Parker playing as a striker, trying to tell the defence what to do.
Yeah,
And there was one
with
point.
my shooting ability, no chance.
Some of us still remember that blockbuster against Reading. And there was one point when Martinez made a really good recovery, but it was a worrying error to start off with, and the crowd applauded his recovery, as you do. You do applaud the recoveries, but it's concerning that you're still seeing that. I mean, it was his debut, so not helped about the three around him. But when a team as good as Brighton can have a tactical plan to basically, well, it's not even Brighton. Any opponent in the league could devise a tactical plan to create two easy chances to target two players in your team. That makes those two players, or two or three players, a matter of emergency, which you have to take those players out, right? I mean, what did you see of yesterday? What did you make of it? How bad was it? I mean, in the ground it was bad, but how bad was it watching it from where you were?
Well, I was watching it in the press lounge at London Stadium, and there's quite a few tellies around, so you can virtually just, it's like panoramic in the end. You can do that, but I was hoping that everyone could actually get around me, so I didn't have to look at a screen. There were so many screens I couldn't avoid watching it. But when you talk about Brighton made their minds up and they put in their mindset to allow, two players to have the ball, that doesn't happen to Man City. That doesn't happen to Liverpool. That wouldn't even happen to Spurs now. Just to name but three, even Chelsea to a point, even though Chelsea, I'm not sure which way they're going to be this season. But that's the way United are. Brighton were a better team the last time they come to Old Trafford, as we talked about last week. The sending off changed the complexion of the game, and United won the game, but it was one of those ones, the scoreline seriously unflattered them. But for what I see, it was as soon as I saw the team and I was in there, and to be honest, everyone's in the lounge there was like it was that moment, and for me, it lasted for ages, but it wasn't. It was a split second, and everyone went, you could feel everyone go, oh, because I think everyone just saw the team, and everyone went, really? Or it might have been me just saying it. I just thought to myself, no, they put up when they played each other last season. They're just showing the team that played. I thought that can't be the team that's starting today. And I was shocked, seriously shocked. Luke Shaw starting, the two in midfield, and I looked at, when I see again Marcus Rashford, and I kind of go, can it be? And no, it isn't going to happen, Marcus Rashford. I really, there's still at the end of the day, they're just trying to pad it out still and hoping that he can come to life. And if he does come to life, but you're still not going to get any consistency. Sancho, okay, but all of a sudden you're suddenly realising that if you are going to move him on, if you're lucky, if you're going to get 50% of what you paid for him, because totally overpriced. So it was much the same, Wayne. So if we could actually stop it now, and we can go back in the archives, and me and you can sit here, bring something back from the past, and just put it on there, and people will go, yeah, not knowing it's something from 12 months ago, because it was exactly the same, Wayne.
Yeah. How much of that do you put on the manager? I mean, obviously he's picked his side. I find myself conflicted with this because I'm definitely not going to get on his back. I wouldn't do that anyway, but you'd have to have a much longer sample size. But it's frustrating when you as a fan, or like me as a fan, you as a former player, you've seen a bunch of these players selected, and you know that really that they're not of the standard that's required, and you sort of give it a chance because first of all it's a new manager. And then you say, well, maybe he could improve them with coaching. Because one of the major criticisms of Solskjaer and Rangnick, really, Solskjaer, they talked about his inexperience as a manager, that he couldn't command the kind of respect for those players. And then you've got Rangnick, who wasn't really a coach for a long time. He was a technical director. So two people who weren't coaches. So you think, all right, Ten Hag, he's coaching. He might be able to improve the players. And then you see what happened yesterday. I mean, is it a thing like giving those players enough rope? You know what I mean? To use a really crass term, but in terms of knowing where their careers are going at United and knowing that they're not really going to be in a team that challenges for the league, do we forgive the manager for saying, all right, he's given them that chance and he's seen it for himself, or do you think that he should have already known? Because we've been saying this for 2 or 3 years, that he should have been aware of some of these players just not being of the required standard.
Yeah, he should have. I think he knows it. He knows it already. Definitely must know it. Otherwise, he's had a bucket over his head.
Yeah.
It's absolutely impossible not to know. Rangnick come out and said the club virtually said it needs a clear out. He said that. I think he said talking about 10 players. He said it needs a clear out. There hasn't been any clear. There hasn't been a clear out. The same players are still there. There was talk of Bailly going here and things going on. Problem is, they've been all overindulged. To be honest, at Manchester United, they're being pampered, and there's nothing wrong with being pampered. I went and I couldn't believe how it was, but you still knew that you have to work hard for it to have that comfortable lifestyle at Manchester. You still have to work hard for it. You couldn't like this lot now and not having to do that. You're all sitting on big wages. No one else can take them on. They can't afford the wages. Are Manchester United saying to when clubs come in that we're willing to serve as part of the wages for you to take him to try and help the new manager coming in, so we can, if it needs three of them to go out, and maybe United saying that it'll take on 20 to 40% of their wages just to get them out, to give the manager a budget to maybe just to get that one player in. It's got to be worth it. So there's something wrong on that side of it to get players out. There's definitely something wrong in getting players in. I mean, if United were going to go and sign a player from the Manchester Sunday League, I'm sure it will still take them 6 months to do it. They still couldn't do it, and there'd be no fee. All the bloke would mostly just say, all I want is 4 pints every Sunday afternoon down a dog and duck. But it's just, I can't understand how it takes so long for them to do it. If they really want De Jong, and now we've got the newspapers now, everyone, the media, trying to throw Chelsea in the mix now, and trying to make it embarrass Manchester United even more. But people are coming out and saying, "Oh, he wants to go and play for Chelsea." If he wanted to play for Chelsea, the talks wouldn't be going on. United it'd be dead.
Yeah.
So obviously the manager, they know each other. He's mostly growing up under him as a coach. They know, he's played for him. So the manager is not going to keep on and on with something, knowing that he's interested in going to another team. I do believe the lad wants to come and play, but he's got his own personal issues going on with Barcelona. So it's just embarrassing that the way things have turned off the pitch. I was hoping that was going to change, but it's still the same scenario. I think at the manager just got to be careful now. Is that when we could end up in 3-4 months down the line when going over the same stuff but with a different person at the helm, because I still don't believe that the players we're talking about, the same ones who have been there now maybe under their 5th different manager, are going to be any different. Short term, they'll have that little bit with the nice weather and that and the pitches and all going on, but they'll get back into their old ways. Because while they're at Manchester United, the only way they're going to change as players, positive or negative, if they move on to test themselves. They move on to test themselves, to go and really learn about life and go to another football club and understand that you have to work a little bit harder. You can't take it for granted anymore. They just can't. They cannot allow someone like Ten Hag to come in and be embarrassed by what he's had to work with. Because at the moment, I was hoping it was going to be different. He took a long time to sign his contract. So saying he wanted this, he wanted that, and he's not going to sign unless he gets that. So we all assumed, Wayne, that he'd got what he wanted, and we're led down that road. A few little signings, and he thinks of okay, but he hasn't built in it. Eriksen is a good player, great signing, even better because he costs nothing. You've got experience, you've got an incredible creator. But he still needs other tools around him. And then when you put him in a midfield and you give him Scott McTominay and Fred, you're kind of saying, he's gone in there looking to work with a proper toolkit, and all you've done really is you're giving him a knife and fork to go to try and dig a hole. It's absolutely madness how he thinks Eriksen is going to link with them. I've got more time with Fred because I think if you put good players around Fred, you will get someone who will make a difference because he'll get around. He's a grafter and he's played in big European games. He's played for his country, Brazil. He's done that. But at the end of the day, you're only sometimes as good as what around you. If you haven't got Fred's got the right players around him, he's a good player. And I've said it for ages, and a lot of people shouted me down. I keep seeing that people keep talking about Scott McTominay and he should be the captain because of what he does. We've seen what he does, and I saw that challenge. And honestly, the noise and that when everyone went, "Oh, it was an awful challenge." These challenges are something back from the 70s and 80s, and the challenges. There's no that now. You should know now. You can't challenge that. As much as you made a mistake, you cannot cover it up by throwing yourself in and trying to be a Braveheart. And people saying that, "Oh, you love United, you work hard." Because there's more to work. There's more to working hard, playing for Manchester United. But that's your job anyway. Every fan who goes and watches a game of football would expect of all those players that the last thing they would not expect for them is not to work hard. It should be there. It's in black and white that without even being written down on a bit of paper. As a professional sports person, you work hard. and everything after that is a plus. But that doesn't make you. That shouldn't say, "Oh, you should have the captain's armband." At the end of the day, Manchester United are not going forward until such time they stop looking to buy overage players, and they're playing with Scott McTominay in midfield.
Yeah, we'll get onto all that. A load of comments coming in from you guys. Thanks so much, and keep them coming. So we'll get to as many as we can. Simon says, "Was there any chance yesterday was by design with Ten Hag basically choosing the team and saying like this is what I've got to work with?" I don't know about that, Simon. I think he still picked what he thought was the best side, even though I questioned the wisdom of playing Eriksen at false nine. We didn't have anything up front until the second half. Whether or not you think Ronaldo's the answer. Richard says, "Why were we doing this yesterday? The poor play that we didn't look anywhere near this bad during pre-season." No, but it's what we were talking about last week. We all remember Van Gaal's pre-season where it looked great and thing. Andy says it used to be isolated players who couldn't handle the size of the shirt. Now it's the majority of the players is mentally so weak. And Louise Dunn says squad was better than it is. Squad is better now than it was when Mourinho was manager. We've gone backwards. Well, regardless, you can argue the top of that. But I do want to come on to something that you talked about before, and it's already been mentioned in the comments about the lockdown. And obviously, one thing that you can say is United finished second. That was a fact. You can argue the merits of that place due to Chelsea and Liverpool and their various problems at the time, but we're talking over a league season. They did still finish second. A lot of that was obviously in lockdown. They were playing in lockdown. I'm just wondering, you can take Solskjaer out of this. I actually think that if you've got a team and you finish second and there's no crowds there, that's probably more to do with the value of an effective coaching strategy. But once you put the crowd in there, it's the temperament of the players and their ability to handle that. So, and I'm not like saying Solskjaer was a brilliant coach or anything, but what I'm saying is when you've seen the underperformance, that suggests that it's on the players' temperament and their inability to handle playing for the club. Is that fair, or do you think I'm being a little bit harsh?
No, I get where you're coming from. That you look at certain players, and the one I look at more than anything is Fernandes. Now, Fernandes during that time was absolutely incredible. What he done, and he was scoring goals. He was making goals. And we could say a lot of them. There's quite a few penalties, but still he was scoring goals. And in his passing, his range of passing was showing then in that. But it was a different mindset playing in those, and certain things struggled. Liverpool struggled at home. They really struggled. You're saying Chelsea struggled. United got that great run going of playing away from home. That's something that should be put to bed, that record, and not talked about, because the problem was that most teams struggled to play at home, because the team that tried coming away there was nothing there. They could just play. It was virtually like just playing somewhere, and it was foreign it was foreign, but it was just when there's nothing to intimidate them. So that doesn't, for me, that season is always going to have something, an asterisk there, just to say it wasn't complete. And just to go back to Fernandes, we're seeing a different Fernandes now to the one who played at that time. His levels of performances have been nowhere near that. There's been the odd game, but then there was consistency in his performances, and that's been a million miles away since.
Yeah. I've got a comment in there. Now all he does is roll around and moan, which, I mean, that is generally the criticism that is aimed at him. We did have some questions that were sent to us by Ben before we came on air, and I thought they were really good questions to bring up. So he said, given how bad this group have been, isn't it necessary to break them up and not have them play together as a collective, even if it means putting in a younger player or two? So I guess that means in the critical areas that you maybe put a player like Garnacho on the wing, or you put Garner in midfield, or you put Laird at right back. I mean, we had this conversation so many times about putting a young player into a poor team, and you still possibly think that it wouldn't be wise to do that with a group of them. But when we saw Annabelle come on at Anfield, and then you've seen the impact that some of these kids have, you almost think that there's nothing left to lose. And those players could really They could transform a lot of things.
It's a good time. It's a good time to do it now, Wayne. I mean, I said it before because it was midway, and it was. You didn't really. I mean, it was like virtually that. It was like kind of. Would you let? It's like virtually saying, would you let your kid go out after? Would you let your 9-year-old go out after 11 o'clock at night?
Yeah.
And that's what it was. Would it be like to put a kid into that team because it was ugly?
Yeah.
And it could have affected them for a long, long time. There was no one within that who was going to help them through it. Now you talk about Laird at right back. I think that makes sense. Dalot does what he does, and it's adequate, but it's nowhere near enough. Nowhere near enough. And that's the position where you think to yourself, could it be made stronger by putting Laird? And I think to myself, it definitely isn't going to weaken it.
Yeah.
It will definitely improve it. You might talk about, but he doesn't get forward and doesn't do that. Sorry, you've gone in there. I'm going to call it number 2 rather than the silly numbers that people wear now. I'm going to say, if you defend and opportunities are lessened by you being there on that side of the park, you've done a good job. You've done a great job. You just talked about Dalot in the centre forward position, and it was what. And the last thing you'd want is Harry Maguire with 40 foot of space around him. You just wouldn't want it in a million years. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, when I played, I had Brucey next to me, and my job was to make sure that anything went over an angle over Brucey's head. I'm there to do the chasing, to close down. I'm the one trying to do everything. And at the worst, if they were to cross it, Steve Bruce would be in the box ahead it rather than Steve Bruce being on the touchline with someone trying to beat him out wide, because I would expect a rollicking for not doing my job. And that's the thing, that area was mine. No different to Gary Neville. Gary was the same. Gary saw that anything that come from that side of the park and it led to a goal, would take it personally because you haven't done your job. You wouldn't be looking to blame people in the middle for not doing this and not doing that. It started from you leaving an area open. And I just think the young lad deserves the opportunity, because I think even he would be watching it. Friends around him, his family saying, you're better than him, you can do that. And that's the way it is in any position. We're all like that. We're all human. We want our friends to do. You want them to do well. You want anyone in your family to do well. You want, if you've got a chance, you want them in a Manchester United shirt playing regularly in the first team.
Yeah, no, I think that, and we're at that edge now to make those decisions, and it's going to be interesting to see how Ten Hag deals with that this early into his tenure, really, because there's some massive decisions to be made, and really a lot of those centre around what the club play within the transfer market. We've obviously got 3 players in. There's been a likely reaction to the defeat yesterday. A couple of left field names have been mentioned in transfer dispatches. The first was Marko Arnautovic, which I don't know how serious that is, but all the reports were that United actually did put in a £9 million offer and it was rejected. This is a player who spent some time in China, is being known to make racist comments in the past. And being in trouble for that. And the only thing is he's known by Ten Hag and McLaren, because I think they all work together at FC20. But that was rejected. He's currently playing in Italy, where he's not. I mean, he obviously did good things when he was at West Ham, but he's a long way from that player. He's a long way past his peak. That is Arnautovic. I mean, and I'll get onto this in a moment because I'm going to rant my head off about this, but this is exactly the problem if you leave something to this late in the window, because we've given a lot of time to giving the benefit of the doubt of a new regime in place. But if you're making the same old mistakes, where do you stand on the Arnautovic transfer? Because a lot of people would say, it's a sensible option, it's a short-term kind of thing. I look at it and think that it's just a massive red flag, and it says the club have learned nothing. They're going to make the same mistake.
Well, it's a bit like the Igalo one. A bit like that. You bring him in, he hardly played a game. I felt sorry for him in the end. Ibrahimovic, I still think that one was the start of it, really, to show where the club was by bringing someone of that age. I don't care what he'd done before. The great Manchester United sides, just wouldn't go out and do that for a player. And then when you talk about Arnautovic now, and talking about saying, well, they're saying they turned down 9 million, maybe near to 9 million, whatever. You say to yourself, you look at his age, you think to yourself, where's the return on that money?
Yeah.
There's nothing there. The moment you get him, that's it. You're never gonna. No one's gonna pay money for him. So again, that seems like a panic. I saw him play here, and David Moyes got incredible how David Moyes must have got his arm around him, told him how good he was, made him captain. The man was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
In that period, in that time, from the sulking one who had big problems under the previous manager, he brings him out, dusts him down, and he was absolutely incredible, working with the ball and without the ball. And then he made that big, massive decision. He wanted to win things, so he went to China. So maybe he just wanted to go there and help make stuff, like boxes and things like that. I don't know. But he decided to do that, and that straight away kills everything what people think about you as a player when you go and do that, when you could have still kept playing in the top division. As we know, it's all about coin. So again, if that does happen, if it does follow through, then me and you are going to be maybe going through a repertoire of what we've done for a few seasons already, Wayne. It just says a lot. Doesn't matter how well he comes in. We're talking about the Ronaldo situation, what's happening there, which I still think that should be put to bed and that should be done. And he shouldn't be at the club anymore, because all it does, it allows cameras just to keep looking at him all the time while he's off the pitch. They need to step away from that. But you don't go and bring someone in not a great bit of difference. There's a different work ethic, a different style of playing, someone who is always going to look to run in behind, but it's not the step. It's not the step forward that Manchester United, not the area they should be going in now after what they've gone to get in this coach and everything they've done with their change off the pitch within the the scouting situation, just to be doing the same things again.
Yeah. Yeah, the other name that's been mentioned is Adrian Rabiot. He's 27. He does seem to excel in the areas. Apparently, a fee has been agreed for him as well with Juventus, and this is a player who's been linked with United before. His agent is his mother, and apparently, when Van Gaal was in charge, they wanted United to put in a bid for him. Rumours about that, so it does go back a long way. He's got a history again of a bit of a reported lack of professionalism. I think after we beat Paris, he was pictured in a nightclub or something after the game. But he does seem to excel in all the areas where McTominay and Fred don't. He's really good on the ball. He's dangerous outside the box on the ball. He's not the kind of player you want to give space to. He's positionally very astute. He doesn't go wide in. He's very good at intercepting and carrying the ball, and he's a lot better at tackling than McTominay, but maybe not Fred. Fred can get in there, but he does seem to have I'm not saying he's a massive upgrade, but he's definitely an upgrade on those players. You bring him in, and the problem is, it has to be with De Jong instead of him. Not instead of him, I should say. And the other concerning thing is that Rabiot's been available. Like Cavani was for all the summer. He's been available. He's been there to get. It shouldn't be necessary to be leaving it until August, until a couple of weeks before the deadline. But that said, I actually like him as a player. I think he's a pretty good player. And if he's always had a drive to come to United, then that should hopefully allay some of those fears about his lack of professionalism. The other point is that if he does have this lack of professionalism and his conduct is questionable, then do you really want him, another player like that, to add to the squad that we've got? It's a catch-22 with him. Where do you stand? He's obviously got a lot of quality, and more quality than what we've got in the two that are currently starting.
Well, I remember him bursting on the scene, and you thought, "Wow, what a player! What a really, really good player!" I mean, he's had that, and then since that time of him bursting on and everything good being said about him, there's been a lot of negatives about him, hasn't there? Where everyone, papers haven't been saying the right things. Everyone's questioned his discipline, his attitude. But that can all change if you work for the right person, the right manager. To name only one player, and there's only one player you can talk about. You look at Eric. You look at Eric's problem. Now, if Sir Alex had been talking about Eric all the time, or the press had been writing about Eric all the time, I'm sure United fans would say, "Don't want him here. Don't need someone like him," because it happened so quickly and so quietly. He comes in, all of a sudden, everything about him comes out, the reputation, showing all the pictures of him, his little flare-ups, playing in his own home French league. But that didn't make a difference because as soon as people saw him play, he goes to bed. But that's the thing. How is he managed? How do you manage it? There is a maverick in him. There is something wrong with him in that sense. He does. You have to really watch him. You can't just suddenly start, following him home and tucking him up in bed and standing outside his front door to make sure he doesn't go out. You have to trust him in a way, and you have to allow him that little bit of slackness. You know it's going to happen. Eric had a bit of slackness, which we was never allowed. We wouldn't have done it, but Eric had that little bit because of the way he was as a person. You can't manage everybody the same.
Yeah.
It's impossible to do that. It was impossible. And Sir Alex managed. Yes, collectively there was situations where you knew where you stood, where you had to stand on things. But we all knew that Eric had that little bit more where he could stretch his legs a little bit more than what we could. But you accept that because there's always a talent there, and he's a talent. Absolute talent is. They can get him.
Yeah, at the Football Brewery, next comment. The first half of the window was spent talking about background checks and right players. Exactly. And the second half is spent on panic buys and whatever an Arnautovic is meant to be. Yeah, exactly. That's what we've all been talked about, this like changing direction. And that brings me on to my little rant. There is, and that's one massive consideration to take into account, is this complete transformation that we've all been led to believe is happening, and including the revision of scouting and how everyone's going to, all these players are going to be recruited and brought to the club, and that they're going to bring in the right characters, and that goes right through the club as well. The way that Manchester United is treated as an institution and all that, and the right people are in the right place to protect the name instead of dragging it through the mud, as has been the case for 8 or 9 years. But there is a very straightforward truth. Yesterday, before the game, there was another Glazers out protest, and I've definitely had my rants in the past on this podcast, but I wanted to try and explain something in a different way today. Now, there is a straightforward truth when it comes to United's recent history, and that is that Van Gaal, Mourinho, and Solskjaer, they all achieved initial objectives of what was laid out for them to be established as a Champions League club. And when they got there, none of those managers were backed to get the players that they targeted. And we don't know how many players that was, but we know the identity of at least one or two of them for each manager as examples. So we know that they weren't backed in the right way. And then subsequently, things imploded and those managerial reigns ended soon after. And then bizarrely, the next manager was always given a lot of money to spend and bring in their own targets and take the club in a completely new and different direction. So the club, Ed Woodward and the Glazers, they've always put the manager in the responsibility spotlight. They've always given him the position of taking accountability when it hasn't been his fault. There's a trend there that everyone can see. Those managers have always achieved the objective, the minimum, which was to get back into the Champions League. They weren't backed in the way that they wanted to be backed moving forward. Now, I know that there are new people steering the ship, and I've been one to go on record and sort of say, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt and we'll see how it goes. But this is now a very critical moment in their own stewardship of the club. They are going to have to back the manager to get Frenkie de Jong at this point. They're going to have to back him to get another midfielder, possibly Rabiot, another fullback if Laird's not going to play, and another striker. And if they're not going to do that, because they can't afford to do that, then that needs to be said as well, because they need to be transparent with the support at this point. Richard Arnold said in that meeting that he had with the supporters earlier in the summer that the money is there. It was such a vague comment, the money's there for the manager. Nobody wants the club to be like Barcelona. They don't want them to end up like, destitute and facing extinction. You can't magic money out of thin air. But the ownership have taken £2 billion out of the club. A lot of that has been wasted. And from the summer of 2014, when Van Gaal lost 2,000 games worth of top-level experience when Ferdinand, Vidic, Evra and Giggs went, they replaced that with Di Maria and Falcao, who had no experience in the Premier League whatsoever. And the club have been playing catch-up ever since, never once thinking about the composition of the squad, never once allowing a manager a proper amount of time and control to oversee a transition to have complete control of the direction of the club. So what is absolutely paramount and critical to the club now progressing is to not waste any of the precious money that they do have. Like you said earlier, Paul, £9 million on Arnautovic. It's exactly the profile of the dirge that has led us down this mess. It'd be a late transfer window signing, not better than anything that we've got, and a youth blocker, not to mention questions about his character and how that ties into this new narrative of they're in background checks and we want the right people to be playing for the club. So you're forced into a situation. If you're not going to back the manager, you've got to give the kids a chance before going down that route again. And at least in the period of time when we saw that in the post-Ferguson era, which was under Van Gaal, when he brought in Rashford, Fosu Mensah, Borthwick Jackson, all those kids, at least we won the cup. He was even able to get Champions League football, playing Paddy McNair and Tyler Blackett in defence for long periods of time. That's because the younger players, they're more responsive to a good leadership, and there's probably a lot more to be gained in the unpredictability of putting those players in than there is with persevering what we know fails every single time. I personally think the owners need to sell up and allow someone who cares about the club to take it forward. Because if it was allowed to stand on its own 2 feet, free of debt, there's no question that Manchester United will thrive again and they'll be competitive again. There are certain things that the club likes to put a PR spin on. One is that the debt and the interest doesn't exist. And the second is that it doesn't hurt the team. It's a barefaced lie, and it needs to be addressed by the club directly because it's disrespectful to everyone who goes every week. Now, I can sit here and say it's good to back the manager in his decisions, and I can even excuse Richard Arnold and John Murtough and say it's their first window. That's what I've been saying all summer. And we can also say that we'll take a fair look at it in September once it's over and done with. But you can't boast about United's economic prowess on all the things that they can do in terms of boosting revenue and all that, and then look at what Arsenal, Chelsea, Spurs, City, even Leeds have done this summer in spending more money than us and not actually face the truth. You can't talk about the club's profile and just exploit it. So I can understand and fully support fans protesting, but it's not even really a matter of anger or protesting. It's about the people who are responsible being in a position to do the right thing to the lifeblood of the club, which is the support. A lot of us acknowledge that the Glazers are like rot. They are decaying the club from the inside and they're not going anywhere until they choose to do that. We know that, and we back the manager and we even back the players in spite of that. But they can't keep putting this on the managers. They can't keep putting a manager in a thankless position like they are doing. If they're not going to go and they're not going to back him, then they have to come out and say, look, we can't support this manager in the way that is necessary to get the club competing in the next couple of years. The reason why we can't is that the debt and interest that we've brought to the club is so restrictive that it ties the hand of the new manager. I think that they thought bringing in an elite coach would compensate for a wide array of ills that are in this squad that he would improve them. But just as we saw in 2014 with that pre-season, it doesn't work like that. So everything that we're seeing on the pitch is a product of mismanagement above the manager. It's not a product of what you've seen the managers do. They've all been given their own mandate to go a certain amount of way down the line with their own plan before that was stopped, and then they ripped it up and started again. They've got to be straightforward with the fans about it. They've got to be honest about it and say, look, we've got to acknowledge our role in this because we're the major culprits. So you're going to have to give the manager time. And, I'm not saying excuse no money, but at this point in time, we would be so infuriated to see someone like Arnautovic come in when you've got Charlie McNeil. I know he's very raw and that he's not had any first-team experiences, but you're blocking his path into the first team anyway. You'd at least want him to be given a chance to make that big step up. I don't know, Paul. It's just, I can't believe that they're putting us in this situation, especially when playing this part all summer. Coming out saying that there's funds there, that the manager's going to be backed, and then doing this. I back the way that they've actually gone about the De Jong situation in terms of they haven't overpaid. A lot of it is Barcelona's problem. They did agree a fee, but now they've put themselves into a position where they're going to have to really push forward and complete the transfer as soon as possible, and they're going to have to do that on a couple of other names. If not, no one is. There's going to be increasing anger and annoyance at some of these players that are playing in the first team currently. And I happen to believe we've sat and watched them for 3 years. We've talked about it many times. Paul showed a lot of patience. To go like, do you know what? It's not the players' fault. How many times have we come round on players and said we've gone, oh, they should be out of the team, and then after a certain amount of time, you go, do you know what? It's not fair to criticise them anymore. And you end up rooting for him, like Lindelof. It was clear that the expiry date on him as a United player was about 2.5 years ago. And yet we came around to him last season saying at least he was the best player in the defence last season. And he's the same with Martial. It was very clear maybe 3 years ago we weren't going to progress with him as a centre forward. And now we're like, well, I wish he was back because he's better than what we've got. It's ludicrous that they put us in this situation where, I mean, and the thing is, there's not much of a really strong argument for United fans when you're discussing this with even a general football fan, because they just look at the 1 billion wasted on transfers, which they're entitled to do. There's a massive economic structural problem with United, and the owners need to really be honest with fans now. I mean, like Richard Arnold was earlier in the summer, he seemed to be very straightforward and straight shooting with what he was saying. But they need to be that way now because it is letting the manager down. Anyway, off my soapbox. Let's talk about Brentford, Paul. Difficult second season you would project for them in the Premier League, but they got off to a great start at the weekend. Great result at Leicester, a great result even in coming back from 2-0 down to get a result as well. They've spent a bit of decent money, probably around 35, 40 million. Got Ben Mee in, a really good, smart free transfer to strengthen the defence. What do you make of that? It's going to be... I don't know if it's even a good game for United to have at this point. I'm looking at... I don't want to be all doom and gloom, but you've got Liverpool and Arsenal coming to Old Trafford in a few weeks, and I'm thinking we could start the season with 3 home defeats the way that we're looking at Brentford. But the point is that no place is a good place for United to go at the minute, is it?
No, not anymore. And Brentford, I think they've signed the Danish international today, haven't they? Is it from Juve? Is it Mikel somebody? Grace Damsgaard, I think it's called. Yeah, I think they've signed. I think I saw that earlier, but that one's good. I think it's medical, whatever. But and again, it's another forward-thinking move by Brentford. That Danish connection have got them, and as we know, Denmark are one of the top sides in Europe now. As an international side, they're one of the top nations now. So they've got stronger. He's bringing in those players. They were fortunate enough to get Ericsson for that time. They're going there as well, where they should have been beaten, Manchester United last season at Brentford. Brentford, dominated them, and it's just naivety cost them in the end. He wasn't happy. If you remember, the manager said a few things I think he might have regretted about it. We all knew it. We didn't need him to kind of tell you again exactly how that game went. So for them to come away with at least a point for me is a bonus, given how they were last season, given how they were at the weekend as well. They just going into a minefield going to that. And then to follow that up, Liverpool at home. So for me, it's so important for United to bring in something to lift. There can't be anything better than, I think, you're sitting there as a player and someone walks in and you go, wow. As when you see that, we'll still talk about when we won the league and all of a sudden during the summer, you sign Roy Keane after winning the league. Just that makes such a difference to the players. Now, you think if De Jong was to come and they were to make another signing as well, a positive one, in an area where it was needed, how much difference would that make between now and next weekend to the fans? What a lift that would be for them, just to see that, it would make such a difference all round. It was just like That's my way of saying put a smile back on, because it was like that football before. The start of every season, you play your you couldn't wait as a player to play your first home game. It was just one of them things. Your ego, everything was just on a high because you just want to get out there and grab the adulation, show
Yeah.
off a little bit. Players would be so disappointed if they weren't playing. They would see the season being a nightmare because they weren't in that first game on a sunny day in August playing at home. And you go out there, and all of a sudden the fans are waiting to see the new signings. Doesn't matter what season you had before, you could have been absolutely useless. You could have been relegated. You might have won a league, you might have won an FA Cup, or even done well in Europe. But whatever happens, that is the start. It's the start of a new thing, a new day, a new start from the previous season. And you've got one or two new signings on the pitch, and the fans they're buzzing. They're gonna see you get better from what you were your previous season. That hasn't happened. Hasn't happened at Manchester United. Everything was flat from that. I was flat when I saw that team. Saw Ericsson playing, and I thought, I like the centre half Martinez. Really like him. Really positive in what he does. You saw a few rash things, but you say to yourself, well, he is Argentinian. An Argentinian not being rash is not Argentinian in my way when you see the football, but he's a proper, really good left-sided player. But then when you see the player left of him, you kind of think to yourself, it's got to be, you need something a bit more. And, he was all right, but people now have had enough of it and they want to change. They need a change, but they need a positive change. And they need the club. Go on, sorry.
In what you're going to see against Brentford, do you want to see him make wholesale changes, like 5 or 6 changes from the team that played against Brighton?
Normally, I think you know the answer to this. I would say no, because that would worry me. But I'm looking at where it is now, after that performance at the weekend, I'm saying 100% yes. Because if he puts that team out at Brentford, I've got a very good idea where that's going, that game. I'm working the game. I'm doing the game as well. And I really don't want to see that because I don't want to be negative about Manchester United. But if I see that same team starting, I'll go, oh no, against Brentford, where their players are going to be on a massive high after their weekend performance, and they've got another new signing coming as well before that game. I don't want to do it. I think it's a good time to go and do it because there's going to be a better form of energy out on that pitch if he goes and does that. If he brings in the players you mentioned earlier coming in, just the energy and just the drive to go and prove a point, it'll make a massive difference. The travelling support for United, they make more noise than any other away support anyway. But they would be even noisier. They will see something positive if the younger players. They've seen some of the younger players already. They know that those players are given 100%. Yes, they're going to make mistakes. They saw that with Ryan Giggs as a 17-year-old making his debut against Everton. But the following season, my first season, wow, they saw a player. So I think it's a good time, and what a lift that would be to everything below the first team to know that this manager's coming in, and being that he's from Ajax as well, and it wouldn't surprise anybody that he played young players. I'm really sorry about that house phone. That's a house phone. No one ever answers them anymore, and yet that one's ringing. It doesn't normally ring, so I can only apologise.
Very quickly, just a couple of comments in. Phil, just complete and utter lack of confidence and belief, playing with fear. As Gary Neville said, it's actually detrimental to the player, placing unrealistic expectations on players of limited ability. And Rory makes a comment, morning guys, I think if no midfielder comes in, then Martinez could end up being that defensive midfielder. He seems to have more about him than McTominay anyway. And that's a good point, isn't it? Because Martinez did play sometimes for Ajax.
Well, you could see with Martinez that sometimes he went and stepped in there, and you could see how confident he was. And you know as well that he's always looking for that forward pass.
Yeah.
His first thought isn't sideways or backwards. Everything is he gets the ball at his feet, and his body is shaped to go forward and to actually move the ball off the spot and run with it as well to create something just by moving the ball around rather than stopping still, flicking it on the outside one way, rolling your foot over it the other way, and then passing it backwards. And again, some people come out and say, oh, I'm persecuting Scott McTominay, but I'm just saying the lad isn't good enough to be playing regularly in a Manchester United midfield, a team that wants to compete to finish in the top 4, because that's sad saying that, but that's what it is, competing competing to try and finish in the top four, hoping that they can get into, win the Europa League or maybe finish in the top six to go at Europa League again. It's not going to happen. It is not going to happen at Manchester United with Scott McTominay in that midfield. Being how the club is, if the club was to transform itself into a proper football club from top to bottom, then maybe Scott McTominay could play in a team with unbelievable top level Premier League players around him and maybe world class players. But given everything there at the moment, United cannot compete to achieve with him playing regularly in their midfield. It's a near impossibility.
Yeah. Just before we clock off for the show, just got to notice that Sachin has been very busy in the comments saying we can sit and chat about what's wrong and what's right with the club. Lol, as if anything's going to change that, and some other less kind comments. And the Glazers have rotten our club. The only way is to their pockets and other stuff like that. We're not ignoring the comments, Sachin. We're having the conversation because that's what we do every single Monday. We're not saying that we're going to make the change, but talking about the need for it, and hopefully that those who are in an influential power like the 1958, like MUST, they're going to action some of that change as well. And we're here to discuss that, like we do every single Monday morning. Don't misunderstand what we're about. And thank you for your comments. Really appreciate your participation in the show. Well, that's it for this week, guys. We will be back next week to talk about that game against Brentford. Hopefully, we'll be talking about the influence of a couple of new signings, and hopefully, we'll be talking about a much more positive result and performance than what we saw against Brighton. If you've enjoyed the podcast, please give it a like and subscribe on YouTube, and comment if you're watching the replays. Obviously, do still reply to those. And if you're listening on the audio podcast, please be sure to give us a review on the platform you're listening on. Really appreciate all the support. Last week, obviously, we had a great season last season in terms of popularity for the podcast. It was great to see everyone engaging as well as they have done, and it's fantastic to see the same last week as well. So really appreciate that. We will be back next week to talk about United's trip to Brentford. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and take care.